Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check the Jumbotron first, before attempting to eat a stack of Supreme nachos in one bite. Now you're just a meme that everyone shares on game day. Checking first is smart, so check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
Ampire. Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. What's up? UVA makes us work the whole day today. No UVA versus Cooper Flag today, Han. Sorry, Han, they lost.
That's correct, yes. That would be correct, yes.
All right. March sadness. We don't get the half day. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Whatever, guys. Whatever, guys. What's going on, Callow? How are you?
Hey, I am good. I appreciated the short work day yesterday, only because I didn't get home until 2 a.m. from Caps. So, this is a week where I need every little bit helps when it comes to sleep. So
yeah, you'll be doing that again tonight. Caps Kings. We'll get to that in a little bit. All right.
Yeah.
Let me start with what's going on. The news. All right. All the people who are very upset that the Commanders only got Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil, and Javon Kinlaw, quiet down. They're filling out the roster. They have a lot of people to acquire and get. But what they're doing now makes a lot of sense to me in that, what are you swinging for? Most of the big players are off the market anyway. I would argue, we can talk about this, I would argue that I want to take a look at Cooper Kupp for sure, that I think now that he's free and clear, and they were hanging on to the last minute, obviously trying to get a deal for him, and they didn't. Now that he's free and clear, that's someone I'd want to take a look at and see if he's available. I'm sure he'll have a pretty good market, but we'll see. But what they're doing now is finding depth pieces across the NFL, and there's going to be a couple of waves of this. They still have a lot of roster spots to fill. They still only have Deebo, McLaurin, and McCaffrey under contract as receivers. So they got a long way to go here. There are, 10 more players that need to be signed before we ever even get to the draft. But they're filling it out, and they're finding, different players at different spots, specifically defensively yesterday, to try to kind of fill out what I think is just the depth of the roster.
No, that's exactly right. What they've done so far is, make a couple of the trades. And then on top of that, just replace who's left. Go look at who has left. Go look at who they've signed. They've gone pretty much one for one of guys that have left, except for the defensive line. I think they've signed 2 more defensive linemen than have left. But what I'm getting at here is Adam Peters, if you want to just talk about who has gone, Cornelius Lucas signs in Cleveland, they get Laramie Tunsil. John Allen gets cut. They signed 3 defensive linemen. De'Ami Brown goes to the Jags. They've traded for Deebo Samuel. I don't know. They are slightly upgrading on each of these moves, and everyone is still in a little bit of a panic mode. And once again, I just think this fan base is very fickle and likes to freak out for no reason. And that's where I think we're landing at this point.
Well, there are 2 that are worth discussing there. Is Kinlaw a quote unquote upgrade from Allen? I'll believe it when I see that, actually. Sure. Is Will Harris an upgrade from Jeremy Chin? Again, I'll believe that when I see it. I want to be fair to John here. John had a great run and went to multiple Pro Bowls and was a pretty consistent player. And he wasn't the dominant player that he was a few years ago. And I think for a lot of reasons, it was just kind of time that I think for a fresh start for him, fresh start for the team. But bringing in Kinlaw, who's got major upside and he's got all this talent, but he hadn't done it yet. So until he does it, to be fair to John, John did it I knew what I was getting out of him every year. Kinlaw is going to have to, I think, to some degree outperform the contract to validate the signing. Harris for Chin might be a wash and might be less money spent at the position, but I did like how Chin played. They liked how Chin played. And so there's a possibility this is not an upgrade either. This also feels kind of just a replacement piece. So on that side of the ball, on the offense, they have improved dramatically, adding a left tackle and a clear number 2. He could be a number 1 wide receiver, and then we'll see what else they do around it. On defense, I haven't seen the upgrades yet. I've just seen filling out the roster. And I think what we're learning too is this is now 2 years in a row at this, and maybe it's just these are your options in both years, and that I want to be fair to them about the decisions, but they're going with short term, not a lot of term players who are very experienced at either 30 or older. So that is, I don't know if that's what they like in general, what they're going for, or they're saying we just got to get better in these spots. These people are available and we're taking them at the market price at the time, because we're screaming towards year 3 of doing this again. Look at all the players that they're signing. Harris signed a very short-term deal. Dietrich Wise, 1-year deal. Eddie Goldman, 1-year deal. Jonathan Jones, 1-year deal. Like, all these people that they're signing are all 30-plus, 1-year deal players. We just did that a year ago. It worked. And I will say, I'll get to the defensive line in a minute. This feels better to me about what they're doing, at least behind the front group, because I would rather have these experienced players. But the whole currently, like, we're going to build through the draft part, that's not happening currently. Like, they're piecing by as we go, like year to year so far. They're kind of piece by piece finding people to fill out the roster that don't have long-term, status here at this team.
No, and I mean, here's the thing too, that like I think free agency is a little bit of an oxymoron. Like, yeah, of course they're signing the guys that are like 30 and above. Those are the guys that are in free agency. Like, the 25-year-old that's really good doesn't become available in the NFL. So
Not
like there
often.
is
No.
like there's a piece of that as well that, like, I think some people need to wrap their head around of, like, there's not a perfect situation of a guy walking and you being able to sign him either. Like,
we got Frankie Louvu. He wasn't old, right? So like
Sure.
that happened last year. The Eagles, often you'll find this, you get like some kind of diamond in the rough steal. That's Zach Bond. Like the Saints clearly didn't know what they had in him, and the Eagles saw it, brought him in. That was the hit of the offseason. But I agree, it's rare. And what you're finding now is they're going with depth, and it's needed on the defensive side of the ball, because when the only move that was made initially was Kinlaw, well, they had to replace John with a front-end starter. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the price point of the contract, and I'll hear it out to a degree. I would really need to know, and I don't know, like, I don't think he's a big enough name that Schefter does a segment on SportsCenter where they ask him, why did he get that much money? Like what was the market? But I would love to find out behind the scenes. There had to have been other suitors. Like, there can't possibly, I don't think they just threw a number at him and he took it. They don't seem like the type of group that negotiates that way and just throws money to anybody. That's not what they've done thus far with literally anybody else. So I think, and I have to believe, there was a bigger market than you probably think, and that there were others that valued him at this number too, whether you think the number was right or wrong. Every other deal that they've done, they've either acquired a guy and not changed the contract so far. Debo, but we'll see. Marshawn Lattimore, we'll see. And then everyone else that they got has been short deals at market rates or below market rates. This is the first one that feels, or at least feels, a little out of line from that thinking. But there's just, I don't know, to me, there's almost no way that they did that as the only suitor for him. There must have been others, and I would love, one of the insiders to tell us what the market was, but he's just not a big enough name to get a segment about it. That's all.
No, and it's fast and furious with all these moves. Like, no one really cares about the breakdown of the contracts unless it's a quarterback, right? So, like, that's the other side of this too, is,
or Milton Williams, or like Ronnie Stanley. Like, it came out after the fact that they think the Commanders are going to offer him a certain amount of money. They think a couple other teams are going to offer him a certain amount of money. That must have been the case for Kinlaw. It had to have been.
No, exactly right. Like, and he's just not a premier name that they're going to break that down for either.
Correct.
So that's like the other side of this as well. You're just not ever going to see that. Like I said, the only ones we really get that for are quarterbacks and running backs. I feel like that's the only time we actually get the real breakdown of the money offer for some of these guys.
So I remember a year ago, and when we played New England in the preseason, and I was looking at them and I went, I hate their offense. I think it's going to be terrible. And it ended up being terrible. But I'm like, when they brought Mayo in and elevated him past, to be the next head coach, and he had been the defensive coordinator and worked with Bill Belichick forever. If you looked across the board at the personnel, you would like what you saw with them. Everything went haywire. Their offense went bad. The team went bad. They fired Gerard Mayo. They bring in Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel started making a lot of massive signings on the defensive side of the ball and actually kind of tore apart that side. So they're kind of rebooting, restarting Devon God player. I think he ended up in New Orleans, if I remember right. But a number of these players that weren't the really young ones of that core, that's been the reboot for Vrabel here in his first year. And I think we're beneficiaries of this. Dietrich Wise is a very, very good rotational defensive lineman. Jonathan Jones had a great run in New England. He's going to be the type of guy they're going to talk about, dog-ass competitor. That's what they're going to talk about with him. He's older now, though. He's also not big. He's like 5'9", 5'10". He's a small-ish corner. He's a great success story, undrafted free agent, made the team, kind of became a captain type of player. But as things change, things have changed. Washington, not unlike, I think, in the receiver room, just need corners to compete. His signing doesn't signal that he's a starter to me yet. I think he'll be competing with others because they still have to sign one or two more or draft somebody. Like, that's still got to happen. He's going to be a rotational piece. I don't know if you'd call him a starter. I think he's versatile to play inside or outside, and they haven't gotten a major edge yet. And because they haven't gotten a major edge yet, I do wonder if they're thinking about Kinlaw, Newton, Payne, him a little bit differently. None of them read sack the quarterback, though. So I'm still waiting for an edge rusher to be signed here or acquired in some way. But if it doesn't happen, they're going to get very creative with a bunch of guys that are essentially defensive tackles that are going to be, I think, rotating up and down the line.
No, I think that's the only way you can describe the defensive line at this point is they're going to have to get creative. I'm assuming that they are going to have to trade down and get some picks to revamp and get some rookies in there, because right now too, like, I just don't see a legitimate setup. To comment on Jones real quick too, Jones was someone that they were rumored to be interested in at the trade deadline last year. And I remember just kind of looking at him then and saying, he seems like a perfect fit for this team. Like, veteran, worked his way up, doesn't have to be a starter to contribute. I actually out of all the signings of this offseason, outside of the big splashes, this is one of my favorite ones. Like, this one reminds me of the Jeremy Chin signing a little bit of like, this guy seems like he's going to fit right in, be a leader, 9-year veteran, 2-time Super Bowl champ, like has won championships, been on championship teams. This is actually the one that I like the most in terms of like the wave 2 type signings. That is the one I really like.
Yeah, the Patriots have been a top 10 defense the last, I guess with Belichick for for a while in general. And last year, I remember coming into the season, I went, they'll probably be competitive because I like what they have on that side of the ball. And then everything went completely haywire, and now they're ripping it apart. Wise, to me, is a good rotational piece whose name you're going to hear a few times this year. He probably won't start. He's probably not going to play a majority of the plays, but on both sides of the ball, really at every position group, but really an offensive line, defensive line, they had no depth, like almost no depth at all. They had Cornelius Lucas as a swing tackle, but the interior O-line, the depth was poor, and it got exacerbated badly the second people started to get hurt. And then the offensive line was just kind of hanging on by a string as things kind of went along here. This is where the Tunsil move is enormous for them. It allows them to move Coleman to another spot, and it allows, at some point, Allegretti probably to become a primary backup. I'm going to feel real good about him as a primary backup as opposed to what they had recently. This move with Wise is similar. Last year, John got hurt. All of a sudden, it's Jalen Holmes off the street, Sheldon Day, who I know they like and made some plays, but like been around the block, hadn't really been an impact player in the past. There were others that were just kind of bringing in and just kind of shuffling through to just get by. And they've decided this year, we're going to handle that part of it. And another one is Eddie Goldman, similar. I don't expect him to play a ton, but like, again, they think this is a better reserve. This is a better rotational piece. This is a better player if he has to play more than what they had. So they're trying to build up depth, even if it's just for a year, because every single one of these players we're talking about, with the exception of Tunsil, is on a 1-year contract.
The defensive line reminds me right now of the wide receiver group last year, where you've got one name and then you have a bunch of rotational guys, and it's going to be by committee. I mean, that's basically what it sounds like what they're trying to do. And I mean, is it going to be the way to go? Only time will tell, but they could only do so much in free agency at this moment in trying to revamp said defensive line. It seems like it is going to be very much by committee moving forward.
Yes. Now, as for the edge stuff, everyone linked DeMarcus Lawrence here because he had a great run in Dallas and obviously knows Quinn Witt, and he just signed a 3-year deal with Seattle. So he's off the board. He came off a year where he missed the majority of the season with injuries. And, I think it's very telling when they don't go after somebody about, I'm sure they think he's a terrific player, but that just reads to me like they just don't think he has a lot left in the tank. Good luck in Seattle. So that, like, when his name popped up, I just kept going, well, I think if they don't get whoever else they're looking at, then they probably would turn to him, and they didn't do that. Similar to last year, we needed a corner, and they didn't get Stephon Gilmore. And I was like, okay, like that. If they didn't want to go get him for whatever reason it was, I think it's very telling about him.
No, absolutely. And I also think this is when they are really honing into, will this guy fit in with a locker room too? I'm not saying this to disparage DeMarcus Lawrence or anything, but I also think that's a big factor here when they don't go after somebody that on the stat sheet looks like they could contribute to this roster and they don't go after them, whether it's money or the locker room. It just means that they don't think it's going to be a fit here. And it could be one or both of those things, or even other things that I'm not even thinking about. But it told me everything I need to know that it took Lawrence that long to sign somewhere, and it wasn't here, essentially.
The one I wish we got is this one now, because we didn't get to talk about this. It happened a couple days ago. Buffalo got a deal on Joey Bosa. I mean, that's the deal of the offseason so far. Obviously, it's dependent on him playing because he's missed so much time. 1 year, $12.5 million. That's a bargain. So that's the one I've seen so far where I went, oh, they got a deal on that guy, and we need that position bad. I would have given up that for him in a second. I wouldn't even have thought about that. I bet there's other teams around the league going, that's all he ended up getting? Really? Okay.
That's not only a bargain, it's a good fit for Buffalo because Buffalo's going to take their time if he does get banged up. They're going to go, don't worry, like we're going to win 11, 12 games, make the playoffs. We need you to be ready for those games specifically. And I bet you his usage isn't as crazy either. That might be the deal of the offseason at this point. We all knew he was going to sign a 1-year deal. We just didn't know for how much and where, because it could have been San Fran and it ended up not being San Fran. And yeah, this one's a steal for Buffalo. And Buffalo got to do the old like nip tuck job. They got to cut Von Miller and then go sign that guy. I mean, that's a pretty good upgrade there.
Yeah, I think, you might be right about that they're telling them, we're not demanding you to have 17 sacks and play 17 games for that matter.
Right.
We need to get you healthy for the stretch run. That's when we're going to need you. And that's probably a pretty good selling point. Plus, like, you're going to a team that's in the playoffs every single year. That's probably a pretty good selling point. If you're San Francisco, like if I'm him, I mean, like, does he want to play with his brother? I don't know. Maybe he wants to play with his brother one day. I don't know. But I'd be watching what's going on there and going, I don't know, guys. Like, I've seen like 10 departures from this team. The other ones that aren't gone yet, Christian McCaffrey, is he even playing? Like Trent Williams, like what's his deal? Like you haven't signed Purdy yet. Are you signing Purdy? Like there's a lot there that probably isn't as attractive. They're having a reset year. They kind of signaled it the second they said, okay, we'll trade Depot. Like they've kind of signaled they're doing it. Their best offensive lineman just signed in Green Bay. Like they might have a down year. Like they might be resetting, trying to restock for Purdy, which is going to be very interesting if that actually works out, because we're going to find out if he can play with sub-tier talent than what he's had. And I don't know. Like they feel like Dallas to me a year ago, where I go, they're just not going to be as good. And I know they came off this year with a bad record because of all the injuries, but now their whole team's different. Like they might not be that good because they don't have the talent to be that good this year.
Yeah, and I mean the other side of this too is like you're already seeing like discussions happen on NFL Live of like if they trade McCaffrey, what's the return? Like when you're already getting those types of
I would trade him in a second. I wouldn't even, if I'm them doing what they're doing right now off of his injuries, I would trade him for anything to get out of the contract. I would do it.
Yeah, and like I would, exactly, just about anything. Like if it's a low round pick and the other team's taking on all that salary, I would go ahead and do that. Maybe you make it a trade where it maybe goes on his playing time or something like that. But yeah, I would move on because, as you said, they're hitting the reset button. You might as well uncover every rock at this point. He's
100%.
He's one of them. I would explore those talks. But what I'm getting at is when that chatter starts, when Louis Riddick starts talking about it on ESPN, it means that it's being floated out there that somebody has called somebody about him. And whenever that's happening for a team that's supposed to be a quote unquote contender, it means that they are officially hitting the reset button on the rest of the roster.
I would move him in a second. I wouldn't even think about it. Just off of the year that he had, you have to move off of him. If you're resetting, you have to move off of him. He's not part of your long-term future anyway. You better do it now, because if he has another season like last season where he just can't, like, he could be Nick Backstrom, where he tries everything and he never gets it back on track. Well, then you're stuck with him until the contract runs out because no one's going to take him. If there are people that are willing to risk it right now to take him, you have to trade him if I'm them. The latest on Trey Hendrickson is nothing other than a bunch of people were floating like the Falcons might be interested in him. It does feel like what I thought when I saw this interview with him. He did a short interview with a local station in Cincinnati, and he kind of just said out loud, like, I don't have a problem coming back here. Like, it wasn't I'm putting my foot down and I want to leave. He wants to play there. He just wants to get paid. And they're saying, we're only going to pay you this. And we have you under contract. And if you can get exactly what we want, we would entertain it. And I just don't think we're giving up a first round pick. And I'm not sure anybody's giving up a first round pick. I would be surprised if Adam Peters said, okay, fine, here's a first round pick. And I think that would have happened by now, actually, if that's what it was. And so I think more and more, this is going to end up with him going back to Cincinnati. That's what I think, unless someone just says, forget it, we need him, just give Cincinnati what they want. And I don't think that's going to be us.
No, I don't think it's us either, especially once they made that Tunsil trade. Adam Peters lost all of his maneuverability in the draft. Like, he still has the first and second round pick, but you're going to need both of those picks to move around if you want to acquire more picks for this year or next year's draft. I don't see him making this move here just because it really leaves the cupboard bare of trying to even be able to recoup some picks either this year or next year, whichever he decides to do. Because I think he's going to try to do both. And I told you, I think 2 weeks after the season ended, I thought they were going to trade out of the first round. They almost have to trade out of the first round to fill out the roster to get more young talent. I just don't see it with Hendrickson. And the other thing that I think is weird here is the Bengals. Remember, the initial report was like late second, early third. Now all of a sudden it's up to a first rounder. It's almost like the Bengals kind of were like, oh, that's too low. Like, we need to reset the price. And now all these other teams are going, no, we're not doing that for Trey Hendrickson. Like, he's not a superstar. He's not Myles Garrett. Like, he's a very good player. He can get a lot of sacks. Like, I'm not trying to disparage Hendrickson here, but that's worth it for a guy like Garrett that moves the needle and is going to sell you a bunch of jerseys and stuff like that. You can market around him. I don't see Hendrickson being that type of player, and I just don't see a lot of people wanting to move a bunch of picks for that type of player is what I'm getting at.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think he's a really, really, really good player, a really high-end player. For the right price, I want him. Like, he'd be a massive upgrade for what we have. He is not Myles Garrett.
Right.
He is not Nick Bosa.
Right.
He is not TJ Watt. Like, he is not that level. There is a different level. He's not one of those players. I think Jared Verse might become that. Like, he is not one of those players yet. We'll see. But he is really, really good. He's at a spot that they need very badly. But I'm with you. And I think, do you pay this kind of premium? Your first round pick and a $30+ million deal to get him in here, and he's 30? No. I think that's but you've got to be patient to want to do that. And it takes discipline, because they did go get Tunsil, right? They're going to end up paying him, but they have him on, I wouldn't call it affordable, but a good number actually for the next couple of years, unless he complains he wants a new contract. So we'll have to wait and see. They got Debo, but that wasn't even a high price. I'd pay a 5th round pick for him in a heartbeat. I would. Yeah. That's a no-brainer to get someone of that level for that price point. But again, you do have to deal with this contract very, very soon, whether it's now or next year. You have to deal with this contract very, very soon. In this case, he wants to get paid. So he's not going to show up here. So now you got to give them a first round pick, and you got to give him $30+ million a year over a 3, 4, 5 year deal. It's not that attractive. If you're willing to take a 4th round pick for him, I would then say, okay, weigh it. What's the money worth to you? It's a massive upgrade. you clearly think you can win the Super Bowl, even with a group that we're talking about that needs still a lot of work to fill out a roster that isn't the Eagles roster. Like, we're still filling this whole thing out. But you, by the moves you've made, feel like we could make a run. You went and got a Pro Bowl left tackle and a Pro Bowl wide receiver to try to upgrade things. So it's not like you're sitting around going, we're still in year 2 of the rebuild. No, you feel like you're putting some bullets in the gun. He feels too expensive to me. And it probably feels too expensive to everybody, which is why it hasn't moved yet.
No, I think it's about right. And I also think this also could be back to what I kind of have predicted too. Like, this could be the Bengals holding out, making the price high right now. And then after the draft, them going, okay, here's the price for next year's draft picks too. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's a part of this as well. Like, especially if it's going to drag out. Like, here's the other thing about the Bengals that's kind of crazy. They have 3 major contracts they need to work out. They haven't like banged out one of them yet.
None of them.
Like, that's what's crazy to me is like,
I would have. One is easy, guys. Just give him the biggest contract. Like, he is, if he's not the best receiver, he's close to it. He's 25 years old. This is not hard. Just give him the money.
And that's where like my mind is blown right now is like, you have 3 contracts, get one of them done so you can start moving the dominoes on your own salary cap. And they haven't done that yet. So this is the other part of the Hendrickson thing. He's clearly number 3 out of the 3 contracts that they have sitting out there. If that keeps festering and keeps sitting there, well, he's going to get traded eventually. It's just going to be for how much. And I'm not buying high is what I'm getting at here with Hendrickson. I think he's going to be available for a little bit.
Back to the Commanders. Derek Forrest, Benjamin St. Juice land. Derek Forrest goes to Buffalo. Good spot for him. Benjamin St. Juice ends up in L.A. with the Chargers. Oh, he gets to work with Harbaugh. Good. I wish him a lot of luck with that. Obviously, these are 2 very different scenarios. St. Juice, you know what? Like, here's why I ended up on him. He's a hard worker. He's a good guy. Like, he tried really hard. He just wasn't good enough. Like, yes. And I think and that's where when people hated on him, there was a part of me that goes, he's really trying here. Like, he genuinely is trying to be good. He's not a bust. He's a mid-round pick. He got put into a position. They tried their best with him, and it just wasn't good enough. And so, listen, I like him. I met his dad. I think his dad was really cool. I got to know him a little bit. And so, I get to know these guys a little bit differently than others. I hated when fan bases, especially ours, turn on somebody, and I feel like it's a little unjustified. Like, if somebody's like not trying hard, or that's where I go, all right, unleash the hounds, because that's just not going to be acceptable. That's not what was going on with him. He's in the NFL. And these receivers were better than him. That's all it was. And so I hope he gets unlocked, whatever it is out there, because I'll tell the people in LA, you're getting a guy who's going to bring his A game, who's going to try hard. It's just have an expectation level of what he is. He's not a number 1 corner in the NFL. And this team forced him in some ways to be a number 1 corner because they had no other options. So that's what ended up happening with him. And with Forrest, he's a curious one. I really like him. I thought he played with the play style that they really liked. He was injured back in the spring. They brought in Jeremy Chin. Percy Butler's got a lot of speed. They liked him. And Forrest just never got into the rotation. It just never happened. And I think there were a lot of us, like, there were a few times his name would pop up when Joe Witt would do his weekly press conference. And we're like, are you ever going to let him play? Basically, like, we think you'd like him if you actually put him out there. I just don't think he ever got a really great opportunity with this coaching staff, and I wish him luck up in Buffalo.
No, Defo, like, good soldier is what I would always call him. And I'm with you. Like, I thought he should have played a little more last year, but at the same time, I am not going to know what's going on behind the scenes or practice or whatever. And he gets a good opportunity up in Buffalo where I think he's actually probably going to play a little bit. As far as St. Juice goes, I'm the same boat as you. Like, he was a microcosm of the Ron Rivera era where he got drafted, forced into playing in a scenario where he probably shouldn't have been playing. And he was just the last line of defense, sometimes literally. And he was hated on by the fan base. I'm with you. I hated how this fan base started to treat him towards the end, where it was like he was the scapegoat. And my thing was always guys. Like, he survived the purge of the roster being turned over. They can't cut everybody, and who knows what's out there. So I hope he lands on his feet. but he was a microcosm of the Rivera era, where guys were drafted and they weren't drafted as best player available. They were drafted as, we need you to play in this position, and they were thrusted into that position. Like, don't forget, Emmanuel Forbes was cut. Benjamin St. Juste stuck around. There's a reason why that happened. It's because he was a hard worker.
Yes.
And I'm with you. Like, I hate when fan bases get like this. It's not like he was Albert Hainsworth out there laying on the field for 10 seconds. Sometimes you have to deal with the hands that you've been dealt, and it's something that I always think is kind of a little off limits when a player is forced into a scenario that they're forced into.
That's what he was, and that's what bothered me about it. Like, the guy's trying his hardest here. He's the one being forced to cover AJ Brown. Like at some point, you have to like take a step back and go, maybe he shouldn't be covering AJ Brown, and that's a coach's decision, but you're also limited by your personnel choices. And once Forbes was like clearly not going to play very much for this team, he was going to be forced into play. This was their best option. And he never once freaked out on the media, never once said a cross word about the coaches, his teammates, anything. I know he put his best effort out there. He just wasn't good enough. That's all. And if that's his biggest fault, then you all need to back off a little bit. That's the way I felt about him. And so I wish him a lot of luck up in LA.
No, the other thing is, like, we knew they needed a cornerback, like, before the season started.
Yes.
So, like, we knew the position of how they were going to actually play, and it wasn't going to be good, and it wasn't good. They had to trade for Lattimore. Like, it's always, I don't know. I just always think it's really weird when fan bases get like that when we've already acknowledged the problem. Even the team kind of knows what the problem is as well.
That's right. All right, let me take a quick break. Bram watch the show, ESPN 630 in Sports Capital.
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Since you're new to H&R Block, we'll look at your returns from the last 3 years for any money your last guy might have missed for free.
I could get money back from last year?
You could. We'll find any mistakes.
Could have really used that 2 years ago when I dated that mistake for 5 months.
Don't leave money on the table. Switch to H&R Block and get a free second look review. Second look is included at no additional cost with the purchase of tax preparation. Results vary. All tax situations are different. Fees apply if you have us file an amended return.
Hey, welcome back. I thought this was a big deal. Marcus Mariota returns as the backup quarterback here. He obviously wanted to survey the market because there was a lot of quarterback movement, and you never know. He actually had a couple of nice moments for the team last year. Second half against Dallas in the finale. He had to play the majority of the game against Carolina, was very good. This was a period of time when Carolina was not playing very well, so they beat a bad team at home. As things stood at the end of the season, that would have been them in Cleveland. I'm glad we played them when we played them. Would have been a different story if you played them towards the end of the year. Anyway, when he did get his opportunities, he looked pretty good. And I think it's just natural. You got to see if someone wants you to be a starter. And you got to take those calls, take those meetings, let your agent do his job, because there was a lot of quarterback movement here. And all of a sudden there's teams like Minnesota where I don't think he would be the starter there, but you kind of never know with the way things shook out, and all of a sudden they need a quarterback to show up there. You don't know how it's going to shake out. Pittsburgh does not have a starting quarterback right now. You don't know. He played, I don't think it'd be Arthur Smith again, but he played for Arthur Smith. You don't know. So I think they took those jobs. He took the calls, and I'm glad he ended up here because he was a big part of the mentorship for Jaden Daniels. And it's nice to have him back. And considering the way he looked in the limited moments he actually played, I feel good if Jaden twists his ankle and has to go out for a half, that he's going to help us win. So I'm glad he's back.
No, I think, the one that he had to listen for that I think he was probably there was probably at least a chatter about it was the Raiders, like Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, the connections were all there that maybe he made a return to Vegas. But as soon as they traded for Geno, they weren't going to sign him. Seattle clearly wasn't going to get him because they were going to be in on Darnold. And then you look at the other teams that have legitimate quarterback openings. It's the Giants. It's the Jets. I guess you can make an argument if Cleveland wanted to sign him. I think this also comes down to Mariota is probably looking at those places going, I'm in for a rough year. If I've got to start for those teams, I could just take the money, be a mentor still, be a backup here. And I think it's really important. You and I watched the quarterback show a couple years ago. Remember, we were questioning whether that guy even liked football or not. And it came across as basically he had like a little bit of a mental health break that he needed when he was in Atlanta, eventually stepped away. But we've heard nothing but good things when he was in Philly and now the last year here. I think it's really important to just point out maybe he just really likes it here too. Like that's what I landed on yesterday as well, was when this, re-signing came across, he looked at his options and went, I like what I'm doing here in DC. I'm going to go ahead and stick around.
He's a Heisman Trophy winner. He's a high draft pick. He started for a long time. I can only imagine that at some point coming to terms with you are a backup is probably hard. And that's probably what happened with the Atlanta thing, where it just didn't go very well. It kind of felt like his last shot. He probably needed, I don't want to speak for him, but he probably needed a minute to go, do I even want to play anymore? And if I do want to play anymore, am I okay being the backup? And I remember watching him in the spring, listening to him and hearing Kingsbury talk about him and going, if this guy plays his cards right, he could be the backup here for a long time.
Yep.
But that's up to him. He's got to make that choice. And if he's willing to take, he's getting a decent salary this year to probably start to kind of go the other direction. If he's willing to do that to help them out cap-wise, just to stay here and be the backup here, well, I think he could do that for a long period of time. But that's up to him, and he has to make that choice. But I'm glad he's back no matter what. I think it's really great that he's back.
The other side of this, too, is you mentioned the Panthers game and the Cowboys game where you got those, the spot play, essentially. I don't care who you are, what they did against the Panthers that game. I know the Panthers weren't playing well. They still blew them out with their backup quarterback, essentially. That tells you as well how comfortable he is in the system. And I think there's something to be said about that, too, where he's going, I'm in a place where if I do have to step in, I'm comfortable running the offense, and we're good enough that we can beat bad teams, right? So I think there is a factor of that as well.
I saw this one and I couldn't believe it. Mac Jones to the 49ers. Not a joke. Remember, Kyle Shanahan made fun of all the reporters for thinking that they would pick Mac Jones with the number 3 overall pick. That, remember all the reports came out that they were going to take him, and then they took Trey Lance, which really was jokes on you guys. But but I was like, for Mac Jones, I'm like, that's crappy to do a press conference and laugh at the reporters thinking, how could you think that we would actually take Mac Jones with the 3rd overall pick? And he's going, I'm a guy, I'm a 1st round pick. Why would you say that about me? So I actually thought it was, wow, life is full circle, man. If you end up actually going to play for them. And frankly, the way things are going with Purdy, it's a little weird right now. So who knows?
I always thought that was more directed at the reporters of why did you guys?
He's collateral damage for it. They're like, ha, 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 ha. You thought we'd take that guy? Ha, 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 ha.
At the end of the day, money talks. They gave Mac Jones money to be a backup for a year or backup-ish type money. And look, I mean, the 49ers have established themselves. They're the quarterback car wash now. You can go to that team and come out the other side and possibly go sign somewhere and be a backup or a starter. I'm with you, though. This is interesting that Purdy's contract is up, and we haven't heard anything about those negotiations. And here's another professional high first round pick quarterback that's going to back up there. Could this be a scenario where they're grooming him to take over for Purdy? I don't think so, but that shot always exists the way that they've been treating backup quarterbacks.
Aaron Rodgers is weighing a Steelers offer, apparently. No one's learned. I think this is one of those, it's like Shark Tank with Mark Cuban, where he goes, here's my offer. I want a yes or no right now.
Yeah, no, exactly.
You're not going into the yurt. You're not going to go walk on the beach in a robe. You're not going to pray to the astronomy that you believe in this week. You're not going to take wild drugs to figure it out. You're not going to go on McAfee and have a therapy session about it that will turn into a discussion about critical race theory. That's not what we're doing, okay? You're either taking this or you're not, and they're letting it dangle out there, and Rodgers is forever going to be Rodgers, and he's milking it. He is totally milking it. How does he not know where he's going right now? The Seahawks traded Geno Smith and signed Sam Darnold before The tampering period opened, by the way, guys. Tom Brady had Matthew Stafford at his house in Montana before the tampering period started, guys. He knows where he's going. He's just milking this.
The other side of this too is like I saw the Roto Wire like one-liner, and it was like Steelers and Giants waiting to hear from Rodgers. And I'm like, you guys never learn. Like, all of you, like, what do you mean waiting to hear from him? If he doesn't get back to you, move on. Like, he's not worth the trouble anymore. And then the other reporting that's happening there too is where if he hasn't signed with anybody, Minnesota is like interested. And I'm like, this can't be happening. That Rodgers, who went out of his way to say Favre never helped him in his career and stuff, could be going the same exact career path as Favre if somehow Minnesota ends up with them. Like, it's hilarious. He's either going to the Steelers, to the Giants in bad situations, or he's going to Minnesota. And I'm just going to laugh if that ends up happening because he becomes what he hated, essentially.
Let's see. 2 real quick ones. Rico Dowdle's out in Dallas and went to Carolina. By the end of the year, he had turned into a really effective running back. Go look at his numbers the last 6 weeks of the season. He was among the top rushing running backs, effective running backs. By the end of the year, he's a number 2. He's a split the carries type of guy. He's not a number 1. But not unlike when we talked about with the Commanders with, is Will Harris an adequate replacement for Jeremy Chin? Maybe. Like, is it going to be a wash? Maybe. Maybe not. Javonte Williams coming in and basically replacing Rico Dowdle, I don't know that he's better than him. So here's a position of need for them that I think got weakened. I didn't even think it was even possible they would let him walk, because how much money is he getting? But they let him, so I was surprised by that.
This screams Dallas is going running back first round pick. Like, I don't know what else they're. Yeah, like I mean, if he's there, but like this screams first round pick, whoever the best running back is. This is Jerry's move. Like, Jerry always does this. They're going to take the best running back first round now, and they're going to call it a day at that position.
This one infuriated me. A.J. Dillon is going to be the backup to Saquon Barkley. So just when you get tired of chasing that guy around, they're going to put some wrecking ball in for a series or two to break the will of your defensive front. That's what they're doing. That's all that is. They might as well have signed Refrigerator Perry and just said, here you go. That one, I watched this and I went, he's the backup? Oh, God. He will have a game because the team will be so tired in the second half when he comes in, where he has 7 carries for 95 yards. And he's not even that kind of running back. But he will, because they'll be so worn down trying to deal with that offense. He comes in, he's just going to run people over.
I can't take credit for this because I saw it on Twitter. First team all quad running back tandem. Like, that's what that is. Dude's had the biggest quads in the NFL, essentially. I saw that and I was like, come on, man. Like, why do you guys have to keep making these really smart moves? I hate it. Come on. What are we doing here?
Hated it. All right, be right back. Bram What's the Show is at 6:30 Sports Capital.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
All right, welcome back. Yes, sir. My alma mater was hot last night. I went to Bender Arena to see American University qualify for the NCAA tournament for the first time in over 10 years. They hosted in the Patriot League, the top seeds host the conference tournament games. They were actually the 2 seed after being co-regular season champions with Bucknell, but Navy beat Bucknell, and then AU played Navy, and they had lost to Navy twice earlier in the year and just smoked them. Did you see the beginning of the game, though?
I didn't
see
it.
Happened?
I didn't see it. I saw the scoreboard. I did not see the actual game, though.
Okay, you're going to love this. Maybe 2 minutes into the game, a Navy player, after a made bucket, when is running down the court with an AU player, everyone's eyes are where the ball is. Nobody's eyes are where this play happens. It's down on the other end of the court where Navy's coming. One of the AU players doubles over and goes down on the court. Referees have to stop play. They go and watch the replay of it. They don't show this in the arena. Probably better off they didn't, but I did subsequently see it on CBS after they aired it. This dude just came up and sucker punched an AU guy in the you-know-what.
What?
Yes.
For like no reason?
Well, there had to be a reason. But he did, and it's clear that he did it. And he's like the guy who's made the most threes for them the whole year. So 90 seconds into the game, they ejected him. They kicked him out, and it was real chippy. This game was like, if you like chippy basketball, this was real chippy basketball. But I don't think I've ever seen that before. Obviously, I don't know what was said or what was going on, but we just saw a guy doubled over, and everybody's going, what in the world's going on? The refs wisely stopped play, separated the teams, moved them away from one another because they were mad, watched the replay, and it was I can't believe it. I was like, wow, I can't believe that guy did that.
That's one of the more insane things I've heard as of late. I'm now curious of what provoked that 90 seconds into a game, because it's not like there was some history there. So I'm curious both ways on that one.
It was. As for AU, first off, Dwayne Simpkins. I mean, this is only his second year. This team hadn't been in the NCAA, hadn't won the Patriot League in over 10 years. This is not a power school. Colgate had won this tournament 4 years in a row. They beat them 3 times this year. Like I gotta hand it to him. Like he's done a marvelous job with them, and I hope he stays for a while because he's done such a marvelous job. You know how this goes. He's been a godsend for them. I bought tickets last year to them to support him because I just knew it. I'm like, you all got the right guy. And he was just outstanding. He was very fortunate this year. The majority of his veteran players came back. And, in a league like this, if you have the veteran players come back and play for you, that you give yourself a real shot. They won over 20 games this year. It's hard to do when you play an out-of-conference schedule where you're playing, you're going to take some lumps. So they did really, really well this year. I congratulate them. Everybody walking out of the arena assume that they're going to be sent to Dayton and be part of the first 4. I really, really hope that doesn't happen because that doesn't feel like being in the NCAA tournament to me. But I'm hoping they get into the main bracket one way or the other, and I wish them luck. And I'm waiting for Sunday to see where they end up. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, if they are in the first 4, it still counts. Like, don't discount that. They still get to be on the primetime stage if they do that. So don't discount it.
My home school in my neighborhood, I got to give shout out to Chris Lund, the head coach at Whitman, and my son's math teacher at Pyle Middle School, back appearances in the state championship after they won the semifinals in the 4A Maryland state tournament. They'll be playing at Maryland in College Park Saturday at 6, which unfortunately I can't go to because I'm actually out of town this weekend. But Whitman will play Laurel. So good luck to my homeschool there as they get set to play for another championship. And then lastly, real quick, Caps road trip continues against the Kings. What do you got?
First off of Tuesday's game against the Ducks, insanely great game. Protas getting his first hat trick was fantastic. Really good moment. Protas scored 6 goals last year. He has 28 on the year. Now talk about a insane contract extension they gave him last year. They're really making money. As far as it goes for Kings tonight, if you remember when the Kings were here back in town in 2024, they killed them. I think it was like a 3-1 game or 3-0 game like that. I expect kind of the same here. It was the first game you heard Pierre-Luc Dubois kind of say something along the lines of, I really wanted to win that game. I expect more of the same, especially when the lights are kind of bright here. I expect Dubois to play really well. I expect Ovechkin to play really well. And go look on the other side. Old friend Darcy Kemper is going to be starting for them most likely. So I expect another win, though, by the Caps. They're completely rolling right now, playing really well. The old Carbs locker room speeches are becoming all-time now. I expect another pretty handed win in LA. Give me like a 4-2, 3-1 type victory again here.
Right. They had a touchdown Washington in Anaheim, right? Didn't they?
They did. I mean, they did. Yeah. They blew them. It was a third period. Like, all right, let's turn it on, boys. And they scored 4 goals or 3 goals in the third period to just, wipe them out, essentially. It was a really, really good win for them in Anaheim. Ton of Caps fans were there, by the way.
Another conversation for another day, but like after the Marchand trade, like I saw a couple segments and people were not one person mentioned them as winning the Eastern Conference. They were like, now it's Florida, or like now it's this. And I'm like, Like, I don't know, man. This team is boat racing the whole conference and doesn't seem to be slowing down. So disrespect them at your own risk. You're right. I think this Commanders Caps thing, it's very similar, where you're sitting there. I'm like, okay, keep saying they're not going to do it, because I don't know. I see no evidence that they won't at this point.
I think as well, the hockey world in general is not anticipating Ryan Leonard like we're anticipating Ryan Leonard. Like, you have the best team in the Eastern Conference. They're about to add their number one prospect who's perfect to play in the playoffs. We'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah, we will. All right, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow. Bray, watch the show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.